Thank you, Robin. It's lovely to work with you. And it's great to see you all. Thank you for being there. Before I introduce my friend and colleague, David Gutnick, I just want to reiterate that as journalist in residence for the documentary option, whoever would like, mentoring, if you have a project, if you want to talk, if you just want ideas or whatever, I'm there for you. So please, we will put up, I think, my email, you probably have it already, we'll put it up in the chat. Email me, phone me.
Lo que pasa es que coordiné para escuchar a mí.
And please mute yourself while this is going on. Thank you, Andrea Diaz. Also, I just want to say a word. We'll probably try and do some more documentary workshops next semester. I'm also, I think, going to work on some workshops on blogging, because as Robin said, I'm a columnist, and blogging, just like podcasting, is all the craze. We're going to work on that. But I'm also giving a class, if any of you are interested. I don't know if it's full. Do you know, Robin, if it's full? The class, our interviewing class?
I have not heard, but I could get back to you with that. I'm not sure.
Okay, because there's a great, I've been giving this, it'll be the 4th year this year, The Art of Interviewing. It's open to everyone in the faculty, all the departments. So it's fun. You get people from all disciplines, and yeah, it's about learning how to extract information from people, which David is going to talk about too today. I just want to put that out there. Now, because we do have a lot of things to talk about, and we have a great guest once again. David Gutnick is, as Robin said, he's been 35 years at the CBC, just hung up his skates a couple of weeks ago, is probably the most famous radio documentarian Canada has worked for all the best shows at CBC, notably the Sunday edition. He's going to do his own little personal introduction, and he's here to talk about radio broadcasting / podcasting. Not always the same thing. It overlaps. He'll talk about it. And of course, you can ask questions. Please don't be shy. This is about interacting. And as much more we interact, the more we can think we're still in a fairly normal zone. So please, you can ask questions at any time, or you can write your questions in the chat room. Without further ado, mon ami, my colleague, David Gutnick.
Hello, everybody. Hello. It's so nice to have you here today. That's very strange hearing introductions like that, because, well, I grew up in small towns and on farms and stuff in Saskatchewan and the Northwest Territories. So all the interesting people were everywhere else. And so I think, I used to listen to the radio when I was young. And I think that's why I I have a degree in African poetry. I ended up sort of going to school at Dalhousie, and I did, labor history and sociology and English literature. I didn't know what to do. I ended up in Quebec City. I was working with a group of Inuit teenagers, and I went to the radio station. And I said to the radio station, look, you should do something about these Inuit teenagers. Many of them were born in igloos, and here they are watching Much Music TV. And it's just a whole other world for them. And someone at the radio station gave me a tape recorder. And basically, I got help from a producer. I had none of the skills that you people have. I mean, you're studying journalism at university. I mean, you're learning all of these skills. I had none of those skills. But the skill I had, and maybe what we're going to talk a lot about today, was 2 things. One, curiosity, because that's a skill that you nourish and you develop. Curiosity about other people. How did you become you? And that's sort of, I think, what is at the heart of a lot of documentaries is, how did you become you? Why do you think the way you do? How did you get there? And how can and this is sort of a strange question to ask maybe, but it's the one I've been asking maybe my whole life, and maybe it's because of where I come from, the middle of nowhere, is this: why are you so interesting? how can I become you? Because we all get one life, right? And for me, when I sit with other documentary producers, it's very interesting is that we, without even knowing each other that well, are able to talk. And the reason we're able to talk, if you're at a festival or you're just with other people who make documentaries, is we're curious about, how did you become you? How did you become a documentary maker? Why do you want to tell stories? What is this? And it's a very strange thing. So I know I'm going on and on now, but I do want to say that it's great having you here, because you are sitting there in your homes behind your computer screens going, who is this guy? What strange hair he has? What are the books behind him on the shelf? Oh, that painting, an upside down rainbow. Why does David have a picture of an upside down rainbow? What's going on there? And if that's what's going on in your head, you're listening to me, but you're also going, oh, there's some Inuit sculptures there. And then your mind starts to wander and you start to go, oh, why does that guy who's this, this old guy that Francine talked about, who's been at the radio for all those years, why do he have Inuit sculptures? Where do they come from? That's what documentary makers do, okay? You're a documentary maker. I'll tell you how. I'm sitting at the CBC. Young people are coming in, they want a job, they want to perhaps make a documentary. So I say to them, so how's your morning been? And they go, okay, it was okay. And then one person says, oh, David, Mr. Gutnick, I'm so sorry I'm late. I was on the bus. And then there was this Hasidic guy next to me and we started talking about religion, and then I missed my stop. And then it was so interesting. And I go, that's the documentary maker. Why? Because I'm hearing a story. I'm hearing someone in relationship to someone else. And so for me, that's a little bit what we're talking about today, okay? I'm going to play some of bits and pieces of my documentaries and we can talk about them. And I'd love to hear you back and forth. I've got my chat zone open on my right side of my screen here. So I'd love to hear from you. But basically, I'm going to be talking about how I see documentaries. You're going to hear a bit about, I hear little bits of the documentaries. They're online. You can just Google my name and there's lots and lots of documentaries out there. And I'm not going to talk a lot about the difference between documentaries and podcasts because that's vast. But I'm going to say this at the beginning, because I want it to be in your heads right from the beginning, is that I made radio, okay? And how does radio work? You turn on the radio and a voice comes out. You haven't chosen who the voice is. You haven't chosen what that person is going to be talking about. It just comes at you. It's like a newspaper. It arrives, you buy it, you're sitting there on Concordia campus, you've got a coffee, you open up the link, and you don't know what you're going to be reading. It's one after the other after the other. And there might be an article you're interested in, you turn the page, an article you're more interested in, you read it twice, you want it in your head. That's like radio, okay? Podcasting is different. You're sitting at your computer and you go, okay, my sister has just moved to Vancouver and I heard there were some murders in the Aboriginal community in Vancouver. I wonder if anyone's made any podcasts about that. So you Google around and you go, oh, there's a 6-part series on Aboriginal women in Vancouver and the murders and the disappearances of women. So you go to the podcast. It's you that is choosing the podcast. So podcasters aren't aiming at a wide audience, right? The podcaster wants to do a very good documentary interview show, knowing that the people who are coming to them are coming to them for a reason, right? Whereas when I'm making my documentaries, I'm shooting it out there. It might be a guy in a taxi driving the cab all day who's listening to me. It might be a woman at home with her 2 toddlers. And so when I'm making my documentaries, I have to be so aware that I'm not just talking to someone with the knowledge of what I'm talking about, or who's come to me because they're really, really interested in my documentary about the relationship in the Outremont community between the Hasidim and their neighbors. I'm talking to everybody. And so my documentaries, and this is the skill that you start to learn as you do more and more of them, is you can't be too specific. You've got to get your facts right. You've got to be interesting, but you also have to be presenting ideas in a way that's accessible, okay? It's like you go to a university class, you know that you're in a documentary radio class and that's what you're going to be learning about. Or you're at a documentary radio workshop and that's what you're going to be hearing. So you've come, you're like the person going to the podcast. But as a documentary maker on the radio, it was scattershot. So that's one of the things I think that's a little different. Now, what's also different is, I mean, I'm looking at all these young, beautiful young faces on the top of the screen here, and I'm going, how many of you even own radios? I mean, I grew up, there was a radio in the living room, and Francine sticks up her hand, but you don't, because radio is sort of disappearing as the mechanical object. You might listen to the radio on your phone, you might listen to it through your computer, you might, be sitting in the living room and put it through the speakers. But more and more, you're going to the podcast. You're going to the shows you want to hear. And it's incredible how it's expanding. Podcast listening is like blowing up. I can share with you a screen where I show you just how important it's becoming. I think, what did I just see? I think right now there are, what did I see? 1,500,000 different podcasts. And that's going up by a huge percentage every year. So the choice is unlimited. Most of them are unlistenable, but at the same time, there are more and more and more of them. People go, I'm just going to start a podcast. Well, about what? How? What kind of skills do you have? All of that we can talk about as well. But I really want to talk about the craft of actually making, I don't want to call it a product, but making the art, because it is an art. Listening is an art. The relationship between you and the people you're interviewing, that's an art. Figuring out sound, that's an art. And look, I have a degree in African poetry. That's what my degree is in. So it's not a skill that, how do I describe this?
Translate.
It's something inside you. It's something inside you. You know what? You future documentary makers, you'll sort of know it, because you'll know that you want to tell stories. Being a documentary maker isn't being the star. It's not. Being look at me. This is a documentary radio face, right? This is someone who disappears into the story. And I think that's really, really important. Is documentary making is often about disappearing into the story, letting the story, which is hard, tell itself. Now, what that story is what your work is. Because a lot of documentary making takes place once you're in the editing booth and you're listening to your tape and you're listening to your interviews and you're figuring out, okay, I did really good interviews out in the field with these people. When I put it together, what is the flow? How is this going to work? What is going on? So I suggest what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share a screen of photos, okay? And before we listen to any tape, I'm just going to go through a few photos, and I'm just going to tell you, just so you know me a little better and you get to trust me a little better, because a lot of what you do as a documentary maker is sell yourself, right? Like, I'm looking out at you and I'm going, okay, who are you? What kind of relationship can we establish so that you trust me as the documentary interviewer so I can get closer to the truth, right? Because documentary making isn't like news, okay? News is what's happening. Snow is coming down. There was a car crash on DeCarry. That goes into the news report. What I want to know is, okay, what's going on? How did this happen? What's going on? What's behind that? News is about what's happening, and documentary making is about why it's happening, okay? And so you're sort of digging into things I mean, there's that lovely German word, which is Zeitgeist, which is you as the documentary maker. You may not see it when you look in the mirror in the morning. When you guys went into the bathroom this morning, looked into the mirror, what you didn't see was this, okay? You didn't see this. The antennas. That's what documentary makers have. Okay, I saw Buffy St. Marie was in Montreal a couple of years ago talking. She got a big award for being a musician over the decades. She was a folk musician starting in the 1960s. And so she got this big award. And here she was in the big ballroom of the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in downtown Montreal with hundreds and hundreds of folk musicians from all over North America who were there, you know, to do their trade show and try and sell themselves to various you know, halls and promoters and things like that. And she was talking about what it's like being a folk musician. And she said, you know what you all have in this room? She said, these antennas, just like documentary makers. Because what folk musicians often do is they pick up on the zeitgeist, right? The song becomes popular. Why? Because the words in the song somehow speak to you, okay? They speak to Jill, they speak to Quentin, they speak to Robin, they speak to, and you go like, why is that happening? Well, it's because the person who's written the song has a kind of sensitivity that picks up on what is going on in the society, the times they are changing, right? They pick up on the society. And you as a listener feel somehow they're talking to you. And as a documentary maker or a podcast maker, if you're sensitive, you'll be doing stories and people will go, geez, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. And you'll grab them. Well, the reason you're grabbing them is because you've picked up on something in yourself that's part of the larger questioning in the society, and the audience will want that. Because remember, as a documentary maker, you're nobody if you don't have an audience. If you're only doing this for your cat or your mom or your brother, that's okay. But you're going to do a lot of really hard, sweaty, frustrating, angst-driven work for one person. You want a bigger audience, right? On the radio, I had an audience of 1 million people every week. So when I'm putting together my documentaries, I want to make sure that I'm speaking to a lot of people in a way that they understand and that interests them and that they can relate to. And that's a really important part of what we do. Okay, there's art involved. There's all kinds of things involved, but it's that really important. Is that really important idea of what we're doing? So there you go. So I got a call. One of my friends is a printmaker, and in Montreal here, he prints for Inuit artists. And he said, I've got this really interesting Inuit artist in town. Do you want to come by? So there's Ilushak. So you see, we're sitting on the floor. I've been sitting there for half an hour, and she's been drawing, and she doesn't speak English. Okay, I'm talking to her through her grandson, who speaks English and Inuktitut. So we're going back and forth. But I'm showing you this photo because you see the relationship between you and that person at the other end of the microphone becomes really, really important. And so, yes, we're laughing together, but there's all this other stuff that's going on. We are, as two people, we're like bonding, right? And that will change the kind of interview you have. And for me, that was whenever I see that photo, I'm back there and I'm realizing that I'm sharing something really important with that woman. Okay, here we go. Another photo. Okay, it's Haiti. It's 1 week after the earthquake in 2010. And I've been sent to Haiti to make radio documentaries about what I see. And about I'd made friendship with a family from Montreal that has Haitian relatives. And so I'd met this family before. So I arrive in Haiti, I try and get a hold of them. And finally I do, and they're living in a tent. And I don't know if you guys remember 2010, but you've certainly seen all kinds of television reports where the reporter stands up behind a microphone and says, in the background, there are thousands of people in tents with little water and little access to medical care. This is happening at a time when blah, 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 blah. And they go, so-and-so, CBC News, Port-au-Prince, or blah, 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 Ethiopia, or blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I saw this and it disturbed me so much because I knew someone living in one of those tents. And so as a documentary maker, what do? You go, I want to be with the people. I want to be close to them. So here I am in a tent with the Merisier family, and there were 10 of them sleeping in that. As you can see, there's a plastic cover on the top and some covers, and they have a jug of water here. And this is their kitchen. They have a little coal fire there. And so I'm getting close to people. And I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but if you're a documentary maker, you will get excited. You will know it. You will feel it in your body because you're getting close to people and they are getting close to you. You're keeping a distance because, you know, but there's something that happens in that relationship which becomes really important for you because you're trying to get into their lives. They're giving you a gift, right? The Merisier family opened up their tent for me. And my gift to them is to tell their story. I'm going to listen to Mama Boss. I'm going to listen to Mayel. I'm going to become part of their lives while I'm there, and we are going to do an exchange. And for me, that's really, really, really important. I'm going to just show you one other photo here, okay? Quickly. Okay. That is what a child slave looks like. That was 8 years ago. I was doing stories about modern day slavery.
12 years ago.
I was doing stories in 3 African countries. I was in Mauritania, I was in Togo, and I was in Ghana. It's easy enough for me. It was easy enough for you. We can talk to the people who are part of the anti-slave movement. You know, there are people who work for the United Nations who specialize in stopping slavery, and they have offices and you can talk to them, and they have press conferences, and there are books and authors, and there's all of that stuff. And as a documentary maker, of course, you do your research, and I've spoken to all of those people. Then I found that in Ghana, there was this guy whose name was Jack. And Jack was trying to stop child slavery. And in Ghana, I don't know if you can see in the background here, but you see how there are tree stumps and trees sticking up out of the water? That used to be a forest. So what happened was in the 1960s, Quebec, as part of the global movement, sent engineers to Ghana, and they built a dam and they flooded the forest. Dam is a little bit like what we have in northern Quebec. They flooded a forest, and then electricity was made. And the idea was that the electricity was going to help Ghana become a richer country because they'd be able to have factories and so on, and people would have lights and all of that kind of stuff. Now, the consequence of that was that on this water, farmers were displaced. What happened? The farmers were becoming fishermen, but they needed the fish in this new lake here were just little. They were minnows. They were 1 inch long. Look at your thumb. Look at your fingers. That's the size of the fish. So the farmers would convince poor families that they would take their kids and put them in school, but they were lying. They would give the families a few dollars. They would take the kids. They would bring them to the lake. the kids would go out in these little boats, they'd throw the nets into the water, and they'd spend the day out there fishing for minnows. Then they'd come back, take the little minnows one by one out of the nets, dry them in the sun, and then go to sleep in a little hut. And there are thousands of these little children. So what I did was I went out and I spent a day just hanging around with my tape recorder and a translator who came from there, just in waiting. And then one of these little boys came rowing in, and there he is, standing in his little boat. And so I spent maybe 3 hours with him on my knees, and he'd never met a white person before. I'd never met a slave before. And I tried to create a relationship with him so that he would tell me his story, and he did. And then Jack and I went and spoke to the slave owner, and there's a whole story about Jack taking these kids and back to their families and so on and so forth. But I just want to say that I'm there again watching this little child slave in his little boat believe in God. And Omaku is his name. Omaku standing in his boat, I believe in, believe in God. So, documentaries are not made sitting at your desk, reading a book. Documentaries aren't made going to press conferences. Documentaries aren't really made sitting in offices with politicians, getting them to talk. Okay, you might have scenes where those people are there, but that's not really what's going on. What's really what you really have to know is that documentaries are about your relationship with other people. Okay, and that's really, really important. So here's what I'm going to do now. It's COVID times. I live in Mile End, and I often get stories from reading telephone polls, from walking down the street, from sitting in a coffee shop and overhearing people. I once made a documentary from a piece of paper I picked up in the metro, and I thought, geez, this is really interesting, and it just got me triggered. Okay. Yesterday, I was walking around Montreal, and I saw that I don't know if you guys know that on the corner of St. Urbain and Mount Royal, Beauties, the restaurant, is under renovation. And there've been workers there for months. But I went there yesterday, and I saw that on December the 6th, this group of, I don't know if they're women, went around plastering Beauties with the names of the women who were killed at the Polytechnique on December the 6th, 31 years ago. And I said to myself, I wonder who did that? How did that happen? And I was walking up St. Lawrence Boulevard, and there it was, Théâtre Go. Again, it's plastered with the same names and their ages. And then there's this tiny little sign on the bottom. And I'm just going to show you here. So, documentary maker, I've got my phone with me, right? And so I take a picture, and I'm just going to hold it up to the screen just so you can see. So there I am. I'm walking down, and there it is. Oh, you see? Oh, it's backwards here, but I just took it from me. It's signed. It says Collage Famicide Montréal. And then it says Avec le corps de l'Espace Go. So it says these collages were done by Famicide Montréal. They've given their address, right? At Collage Famicide. So it's their Twitter account. And we've got permission from the Espace Go to do this. Hey, there's a documentary.
David, I'm going to jump in here because
Yes.
you've shown us, you've said some wonderful stuff about, what gets you going, the curiosity, it's not what's happening, it's why it's happening, the importance of getting close to people.
Mm-hmm.
But then show us, how do you know you have a story? I mean, that's a great idea, and you've got possibly a great character, but how do you know you have, and when do you know you have a story? Perhaps you can illustrate it with some of your stuff.
Okay, I'm going to do that now. I'm going to start with the story, okay? Really quick, and then we're going to listen to some tape. So, I was a reporter for the morning show here. And I was told the Montreal International Music Festival is on. Go and talk to a judge. How does a judge in a music festival decide who the winner is? I was so scared, man. I don't know much about music. I love listening to music. I can't read music. So there I am going to interview a judge who's a world famous violinist. So I run to the library and I read all about the history of violin and all this kind of stuff, in about 2 hours. And I run to see him, and he's a very nice guy. And then we sit down to do the interview in the hall, right? While people are practicing. So I wanted to have a scene there. And sweat starts to dribble down my arms. I'm so nervous. And I say to him, how do you choose the winner in a violin competition? And then I almost shut my eyes because I'm so afraid that he's going to go, well, it's the C note in relationship to the D note, and then Beethoven did this, and blah. And I'm going to go, how is this? I'm just thinking to myself, oh my God, this person is going to see something so complicated that I'll never be able to put it on the radio. And I'm such an idiot, and I'm going to get fired. And then the violinist looks at me and he smiles and he goes, that's a really good question. And he says, well, he says, I've been a violinist now for 50 years. He said, I've been thinking about music my whole life. And he goes, so these young people get on the stage, he said, and they start to play. He said, I sit there and I close my eyes. I listen. And he says, when the hair on the back of my neck goes up, that's the winner. So to answer your question, Francine, how do I know it's a story? It's because as documentary makers, you're thinking about what's going on here, what's happening, what is the relationship between A and B and what I heard on the news today? What are my feelings about animals? Why are these all these? You come out of Metro, and there's a woman and a guy covered in covers with their dog, and you go, oh my God, it's like snowing out. They're here. How did they get to be like this? And so you crouch down and you say, hey, I'm David. Who are you guys? How? And they go, oh man, it's like, I'm so, you got any food money? You got any money? I said, yeah, I'm going to get you some dog food. I go back in and I get a can of dog food. And I come out and we start talking. And I realize that these people are great with their dog. They're really good. But why are you guys outside? Well, man, the shelters won't let us in. Well, why not? Well, man, none of the shelters want dogs around, man. And the dogs, like, man, without this dog, I'd be dead. You go, why? Man, you don't understand, man. I was like so strung out, and the dog started barking, and I go, yeah. And he goes, well, man, my friend heard the dog barking, man, and he stopped me from dying of overdose. So I'm going, my head is going clickety, clickety, click. And I'm okay. What's the story here? And I go, okay, heroin addict, saved by dog. Dog is therapist. Dog saves, guy from dying, and society won't give them a break. Does anyone want to give these guys a break? What's going on? So I start phoning around. And what happens? I find that there's this woman who used to be a real estate agent. She drives a Porsche, who quit her job in order to go to dog food stores and drive around the streets of Montreal in her Porsche. And when she sees these people with their dogs, she gets out and says, how are you? You guys okay? Do you need some dog food? Can I give you a ride anywhere? Hey, how's your dog? I see he's got a sore paw. I know this vet. Oh, we don't have any money, man. I know the pet. I know his foot got froze. She said, don't worry about it. I know a vet who'll treat your dog for free. I'll be back at 3. Can you guys be here at 3 this afternoon? And I'll figure out a way for us to go to the vet together. So you're starting to build your story, right? How do you build stories? You build them out of curiosity. You build them out of your guts. You build them out of your heart. You build them out of your brain too. I'm not saying documentaries can't be, you got to think a lot. You got to know the subject area. You got to talk to the experts. You got to read the books. You got to do all that stuff. But you're also, in part, kind of artist, right? And so I was, I was in Montreal, and I was walking through Outremont, as I told you earlier. It was COVID times. It was the spring, and I don't know if you guys remember, but all the churches were shut down, and so were the synagogues. Well, when the churches and synagogues were closed, didn't matter too much to the Christians, because there's no real rule that you have to go to church. But if you're Orthodox Jew, if you're a Hasidim, you have to pray in a group. And if you can't do it in church, in your synagogue, in your group, you do it outside on the balconies. And I was walking down Hutchison Street in May, and I heard people on their balconies. And so it became a documentary, and it went on the Sunday edition. And here's Michael Enright, who's the host. I'm going to play you his intro and then a minute or two of the documentary. Remember, this is a documentary I found by walking down the street in my neighborhood.
His father was admired and well known. Visitors from Brooklyn's Hasidic community drove up to toast the family's good fortune. It was a huge event, but within days, it had spawned a nightmare. The coronavirus had spread among the guests. The groom's father got sick. An uncle was rushed to intensive care. A 67-year-old man died. A special Hasidic paramedic team sprang into action in head-to-toe PPE. And Montreal's Orthodox Jewish community was back in the news. It was a COVID-19 hotspot. At the best of times, the relationship between the more than 10,000 Hasids and their neighbors in Outremont and Mile End is complicated. For years, there have been tensions and tender feelings. COVID-19 had the potential to drive people further apart. But then something remarkable happened. The traditionally insular Hasids began reaching out to their neighbors, and some of their neighbors began reaching back. Here is David Gutnick's documentary, At the Root of Everyone.
So I found this cookie on the outside of my door. It was a surprise. The doorbell rang, came downstairs, opened the door, nobody was there, but there was a cookie wrapped in plastic. I'm opening it now.
Jennifer Dorner lives with her husband and kids in a 3-story red brick apartment building on Avenue La Joie in Outremont. Jennifer's an artist and arts administrator.
They look like chocolate cookies, very large, soft. There's a scroll with a beautiful golden ribbon. And there's a little message on the front. It says, "Ça va bien aller," so all will be well. It says, "Dear neighbor, now that we start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, let's continue to hope and pray for everyone's health and well-being. On Tuesday, the 12th of May at 6 p.m., we will be singing on our porches with proper social distancing for about an hour to celebrate Lag Bomer. P.S. These cookies are homemade with appreciation. Great caution and safety measures were observed. Your neighbors of La Joie." No, it's delicious. It really is.
Down the sidewalk, little boys race scooters, their yarmulkes perched on top of their heads, their long curls, payot, waving in the wind. Women push strollers. Men with long beards and shiny black coats weave in and out, keeping physical distance. Sisters in matching pink dresses sit on a balcony, reading. They're all Jennifer Dorner's neighbors. Over the past 5 years, Jennifer's always made a point of being friendly with them. She's watched the kids grow up. She talks report cards or recipes or municipal politics with their mums and dads. And during those years, she's watched the boys and men walk to the synagogues, sometimes 2 and 3 times a day. And then, in the middle of March, they stopped and started doing some of their praying in public. Jacob Pollock did.
We were worried if how the people would take to this, but thank God, because of the good neighbors letting us pray outside, that has really helped, has alleviated the need to go to the synagogue, although we would like to.
It was just before Passover we started hearing the praying and the singing on the porches. And I noticed that they all face in the same direction. And sometimes you hear the boys singing and then there's a response. But what's really interesting is that it's happening all over the neighborhood. And so you hear these echoes from the distance. So it's sometimes in sync, comes in and out. It turns to song and prayer. So we started enjoying listening to this. We became part of the ritual in a way, even though we're not a religious family. We really appreciated the comfort that it was bringing us, having this kind of routine. One day, I think it was a Saturday morning, the singing was coming in through the window. It was a warm day, so the window was open. And I walked over to the window with my camera, my phone, and started recording the boys next door singing. And I just found it so beautiful and so moving. So I posted it to Twitter, thinking maybe a couple of my friends would like it. And it just started being shared. I think up till now there's 17,000 views. I've been getting messages from people in New York and Israel and all over the place. People that are really appreciative to, in a way, share this moment together.
It's not music to everyone's ears. This is a community that's seen its share of conflict between the ultra-Orthodox and some of their more middle-class, non-Jewish neighbors. There have been spats about double-parked school buses, the proliferation of synagogues, differing community standards about the role of women, and overcrowding. And then came COVID-19, and that March wedding, which took place a few days after Quebec had shut down schools and ordered travelers to self-isolate for 14 days. Soon, in Montreal, nobody felt safe. The whole city, every neighborhood, was tense and on high alert. The number.
Okay, stop share. Hi. So to answer Francine's question is, how do you find a story? Well, look, we all know about various tensions between different communities. And, you know, as a citizen, you know this, and you go, okay, how then can that be resolved? And COVID was all about bad news, right? Everything was bad news. People were dying. Senior citizens in group homes were having terrible time. They were dying. We couldn't go out. I was walking down the neighborhood, through the neighborhood, and then a good news story happens, right? Is that neighbors are starting to talk to each other who haven't talked to each other before. And so I decided that was a story I wanted to tell. And this was a difficult story, man. I had to put my microphone on the end of a pole. The Hasidic fellow that you heard there, he doesn't want to talk in my microphone. I had to basically explain to him what I was doing and why I was doing it. He looked around. He was very nervous about speaking to someone who wasn't a member of the community. But I managed to create a trust with him. I said, look, here's the story I want to tell, because I think this is the story that's happening, is that you and your neighbors who normally don't get along that well or who ignore each other, now because of COVID are forced together. So let's tell that story. And what does it mean? And so that is the story I ended up telling. And I mean, it goes on. And what ends up happening is Martha Wainwright, the pop star, the singer, she lives in Outremont, and she has a coffee shop hall that she bought on Park Avenue. And so she got the idea. During COVID, she started off by giving concerts on the roof. Well, someone went to her and said, you know, Martha, why don't you get some Hasids to sing on your roof, and then it'll go out on Facebook. And that happened. And so I just made sure that as the documentary maker, I could be on the roof and be at that concert and talk to people about what does it mean to come together, right?
Can we hear that, David?
Yeah.
Can we hear it?
Yeah, you can hear it. Here, I'm just gonna share screen. I'm gonna play you a part where it's later on in the documentary, And this is Martha and the Hasidic people. Here we go. Okay, hold on a second. I'm just going to take it back a little. Here we go.
Bows and flows of angel hair, ice cream castles in the air, and feather canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way, but now they only block the sun. They rain and snow on everyone. So many things I would have done, the clouds got in my way.
On this Tuesday evening, Martha Wainwright was standing on a flat rooftop just down the alley from where Mayor Feig lives. A black cloth mask hangs around her neck. This spring, Martha was supposed to be on tour. Instead, she's at home with her kids in Outremont. Instead of filling up concert halls, she's been standing in front of a microphone for people tuning in to Pop Montreal's Facebook Live.
There's not a cloud in the sky.
In her first performance, Martha sang Leonard Cohen songs. In the week since, she's invited other singer-songwriters to come up to the microphone, everybody staying 2 meters apart. This evening, there are 4 very special guests, 4 singers from the local Hasidic community.
We've been turned inside out, upside down, and when you do that, you're going to see who lives in the neighborhood with you.
Yeah, I think everyone who kind of lived in the neighborhood was kind of surprised and inspired by all the Hasidic singing, the davening happening on the balconies, especially if you're non-Jewish.
Before COVID, Dan Seligman was booking rock bands for the Pop Montreal International Music Festival. Now he's sticking closer to home, booking locals. A flurry of phone calls brought David Klein, Antje Eckstein, Joel Markowitz, and Moshe Wenstock to this rooftop. On Tuesday evening, Martha and Dan broadcast their voices to people around the world on Facebook Live.
There's so many misconceptions about Hasidim, they don't have cell phones, technology, internet. I think, obviously there are extreme forms of any religious institution and category, but I think, it's impossible to escape modernity. You hear so much of the negative that it's kind of nice to show the light and see that at the kind of root of everyone, people are just humans who like singing and dancing and music, and at times like this when people are so deprived of cultural institutions and going to the bar or going to the concert hall, it's kind of nice to just remember that you can go out on your porch and sing a song and have a little hope and light.
And we're going to live together through this together.
If COVID hasn't taught us a lesson, nothing else will teach us how to love each other more.
For the Sunday edition.
So there you go. You see, that came from me walking down the street. So, you know, as documentary makers, what I was always thinking about is, how can I relate to people? It could have gone on off the rails, right? This could have not worked, but I just hustled and hustled. I spent maybe 5 days out on the street, talking to people, thinking, making phone calls with that, walking around with that microphone on the end of my stick, and then being on that rooftop. Now, the young Hasidic boys wouldn't talk to me. And it was interesting. Usually Martha sings first, and then Martha's guests on that roof would sing after Martha. So they'd be waiting there, waiting for Martha to finish. Hasidic men are not allowed to hear women singing. It's against their interpretation of Judaism. And so they sang and left, and then Martha sang. So it was, and they wouldn't speak to me. They said hi and everything, but as soon as they saw my tape recorder, they went, no interview, which is fine. So I don't know if you noticed, but I played an awful lot of music there. Because when you're making documentaries, you're balancing many things, right? You're balancing the scenes that you're in. So you want to take people there, right? With their ears. It's not like video. This is very different from what Julian did, for example, by showing you video. I'm trying to create, as an audio documentary maker, podcaster, I'm trying to create scenes in your head. And here, I figured people had heard enough blah, blah, blah. All they needed to hear really was the Martha and Dan Sigelman and Mayor Fag, the Hasidic fellow, tell you exactly what that story was. So it was in your head. And then let the art, let the beauty of the music, let the voice of the very different voice of Martha Wainwright meet the beautiful voices of those young Hasidic guys, and let you decide as the audience. Let you decide if maybe those voices were going to touch you and you were going to rethink your relationship to other communities, be it the Hasidic community or other communities. And I just think that that's really important. When you guys are making documentaries and thinking about documentaries, you're thinking about the whole human being, okay? For me, that's always been at the heart of what I do, is I'm not doing a story which is just this happens to so-and-so, and I'm going to try and figure out if it's true or not. Many documentaries do that. There's tons of, that's what they do. But I tend to find that in audio, the relationship that you have with your guests becomes very personal, right? When I was a little boy in the Northwest Territories and on the farm, I had a little transistor radio. They were about this big, and they could get a couple of channels. They had a long wire that came that I used to tie to my bedpost. And I'd go under the covers and there'd be a voice, and the voice would be talking to me, and it would be coming from out in the universe, and it would be talking to me, and I would start to have a relationship with that person. And one of the weird things about audio as opposed to video is in audio, you have to like the person you're listening to. So you as a documentary maker have to figure out a way of making the most horrible monster sound so human that no matter how much you as a listener disagree with that person, you can relate to that person, okay? And I think that's something that's really, really different than video. Because in video, someone stomps away from the screen or they get all like this. Man, on TV, that works great. On a film, that works wonderful. And on radio or on a podcast, they will turn tune out. They will turn you off. And I think that's really an important thing. Now, what I'm going to do now.
No, I just want to know if there's any questions.
Oh, are there any questions? Sorry, blah, 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 blah. Are there any questions?
Because that was wonderful, David, really. I thought it was a great exposition, but there might be questions at this point.
Hi, hello, everybody. Any questions? Yeah, are any of you thinking about becoming documentary makers? Do you like doing documentaries and you want to continue making them? I see Nanur shaking her head. Yes?
Hi, I was actually in the class where in Barry Lazar's class where you came and spoke to the class.
Oh.
Yeah, well, that was I really remember that class super well because it was, I don't know, I feel like time stopped and like I know the class continued for like longer, but like I just wanted to continue listening and it was so much fun. But yeah, I actually do have one question.
Yeah.
Like from when you started out making documentaries until now, like what's one lesson that you personally as a documentary maker learned, or what's like, I don't want to call it a mistake because like it's part of like evolution in the way I see it, but what's one thing that you realized that you really improved doing as you continue making more documentaries and, you know, gained more experience as you went along?
That's a really good question. And you know, you said something really interesting just now. You said something really important. Time stopped. You know what? That's what we want to do. We want to make time stop and create this space. So what I've learned to do is create this space where I am with my microphone and Nanor, you're there, and I try to create this personal relationship with the two of you. And I don't cut you off and I don't talk too much. I don't go, yeah. So one of the things I've learned, and I mean, I try to do this in my own personal relationships too, in my life, is that I shut up. And it's the weirdest thing, is that being this documentary maker, on the one hand, you have to be super verbal and you have to be super outgoing, right? Because you're going up to people you don't know. You're wandering around a country that you don't quite understand. You're with people who have very different life experiences than you do. And you have to find a relationship there. So you have to sort of sell yourself. You have to create trust. You know, there are studies that show, it's really interesting. When this broadcast started, this Zoom meeting started, and if you haven't met me before, you know what? I had about 20 seconds to create trust. Even before I spoke, you were looking at me, you were examining me, you were looking at my eyes, I'm looking at you. It's a very different experience on Zoom, but it still happens. But in real life, there are all kinds of studies that show that you have, that the subconscious of people is so powerful that we almost can feel in our guts if we should trust someone or not trust them. And so me as the documentary maker, I have to build that trust, right? And remember, it's a little bit like acting in the sense that when someone goes on stage, nothing is an accident, right? Like that, my hair is like this. It's true, I haven't had it cut since COVID started. On the other hand, I decided to not cut my hair, that I would be sort of ready to be a little weird, a little outside the box. I'm not in a suit and tie. So how you present yourself is really important. So over the years, you know, what I've learned is I'm a shy guy. And before I go out to do interviews, I almost feel like vomiting because I go, oh my God, I'm going out on Hutchison Street. Today, I am going to have to talk to Hasidic people. I'm going to have to be quiet. I'm going to have to be calm. I'm going to have to be listening. I'm going to have to say to myself all the time. And I keep a little notebook with me. What's the story? What's the story? And I'm constantly saying that, what's the story? So what I've learned, to quickly answer your question here, is to learn how to shut up and listen. And two, to constantly be saying to myself, what's the story here? why am I talking to this person? What am I getting from this person? How will this fit into my story? And how will it change my story? Because as a documentary maker, my job is not just to go, oh, I think the Hasids and the people in Outremont should get along. My story is going to be how they get along. What if they don't get along? I have to be ready to go there too. And as a documentary maker, you have to be ready to be challenged. You know, I'll end with this, and then I don't know if there are any other questions, or we can go on, is Leonard Cohen, who lived a few blocks from me over here, was on the radio, and he had a new book out or a new concert series or something. So he was behind the microphone, and the host was, well, Mr. Cohen, it's very nice to have you in studio, blah, 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 blah. And then he asked some questions of Leonard Cohen, and Leonard Cohen started to answer. And then Leonard Cohen stopped, and he looked at the host, and he said, you know, I'm getting sick and tired of hearing my own opinions. You as documentary makers, go there. Get sick and tired of your own opinions. Be ready to challenge yourselves. Because, you know, being a documentary maker it's not just a job. While you're there, it is your whole person that's involved, okay? It's your whole person. It's your, and if you get to that point, where it's you, it matters to you. The relationship between those Hasids and those people in Outremont, it matters. You know, why were we all, you know, why did so many Canadians have Trump derangement syndrome? Man, I was like glued to the news for months because of Trump. Well, you know, it's the United States. It's because it mattered to me. Well, why should it matter to me? Well, it was about power. How can a man in that kind of position say those kinds of things? That offends me. And then I would have to go, well, why does it offend me? Does it really matter? And then you're thinking, so there you go. These things matter, okay? It's like documentaries matter because it's about storytelling that changes people's lives. And it does change people's lives. And the next little bit that I'm going to play will be about that, okay? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to share a little story, which is here. Gristle in the stew. Okay. Francine asked, where do you find stories? Well, my producer from Toronto phoned me. She said, you got to have a story in a couple of weeks. I went, oh my God, how can I find a story? She said, you better be a good story, you know, because your last story was like it wasn't very hard hitting. We need a hard hitting story. She said, look around. And I started, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I was reading small town community newspapers online. And I saw that there was a guy who was interned because he was disabled when he was a little boy in an institution in Ontario, and now he was really angry with the government of Ontario because the government of Ontario didn't want to apologize. So I said, that sounds like a story. So I started digging around, okay, making phone calls. I went to a meeting with some people who were involved in a class action lawsuit against the government of Ontario. And, you know, when you're a disabled person, it's really hard to get into the news. You know, if you're a hockey player or you're a rock star or you're a politician, it's easy to get into the news. So I said, you know what? I'm going to start digging around here in this story and see what I come up with. The story is called The Gristle in the Stew, and this is the beginning of the documentary.
Hello, Patricia?
Hi, you're here before I am.
Hi.
This is awesome.
How are
and
you?
I just came out. My name's Pat. Yeah,
Hi, Pat. I'm David.
Yes,
so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Dave.
So how are you?
Not bad.
So you live right around here?
Well, not this building, but the next one with the underpass. They call it the Annex. What's your name again?
David.
David. Surprise! Ready with that microphone?
Patricia Seth has a mess of thick blonde hair, is a little over 5 feet tall, and is stocky, like a bulldog.
It's my smoothie.
This morning, her black nylon purse is tightly zipped and strapped around her neck.
We're going out to Aurelia today.
Yes,
You don't mind going back?
I don't mind going back today.
It's going to bring back memories.
But that should help with the class action suit. I love it down here.
Patricia lived in Huronia Regional Center in Aurelia for 14 years.
It was a bad place. Once you see what I'm talking about, you'll know. Do you have the keys to get in, or does somebody have to let you in? It might be boarded up.
Huronia, where Patricia spent her childhood, has been around since 1876. Back then, it was called the Aurelia Asylum for Idiots, the first institution built for the intellectually disabled. It was a victory for the eugenics movement that wanted the disabled removed from mainstream society. Over the years, more and more parents were encouraged to send their disabled children to Aurelia. By the 1960s, it was widely agreed that 1 in 33 children was intellectually disabled, 1 on every street. The title of the government film shown to their parents.
We speak of retarded children, and this is correct. The infants grow and look like adults, but mentally they will always remain children, and they must be treated and cared for as children for the rest of their lives.
In 1964, Patricia Seth was 6, a blonde, frustrated, disabled whirlwind. Her parents decided they could no longer keep her at home. They packed up the car, drove to Aurelia, and dropped their middle daughter off at the admissions office. They were encouraged not to visit.
I always said to Mom and Dad, when can I come back home? But they never gave me a straight answer. They said that I would be there till I died.
My name's Marie Slark, and I went into Aurelia when I was 7, and I got discharged in February of 1974. I'm 57 years old.
Marie and Patricia have been friends for almost 50 years. Patricia is the energetic, bold one. Marie is shy. When Patricia and Marie were little girls, they ate at the same long tables, ran around the same courtyard, and slept in the same crowded dormitory. Now, they have their names on the front page of the same class action lawsuit.
So you would have done virtually anything. My name's Jim Dolmage. I'm one of the litigation guardians in the class action lawsuit. Litigation.
Okay. So, do you like Patricia? Yeah. So, I'm a documentary maker. I am in Toronto. It is 9 o'clock in the morning. I've had my coffee at Tim Hortons. I've turned around and around, gone to the bathroom about 3 times. I'm going to be meeting Patricia. I've rented a car, and I'm going to be picking up Patricia and Pat, and we are going to be going to the Aurelia Center. I don't know we're going to find. It's closed. I don't know what's there. So what did I do? I was meeting her at 9. So at 8:50, I'm sitting on the park bench with my microphone turned on, because I'm thinking to myself, well, if I don't have it, I can't invent it. But if I have my first meeting with Patricia on tape, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what's going to happen? There's a Buddhist monk, and who lives in. Her name is Pema Chodron. She was a school teacher in the United States, and then her husband had an affair. Said the marriage is over. She was in crisis, and this was decades ago. So Pema became a monk. Okay, she lives in Nova Scotia. She's written a lot of books. So she was on television, and she was being interviewed by this famous journalist. What is it being a monk, and what kind of wisdom, Pema, can you give me about life? And so he said to her, the host, Pema, what is the most important question that a human being can ask? And she said, I have an answer for that. So I'm like watching this on TV, right? Like I'm sitting at the end of my edge of my chair, because here's someone who's going to give an answer. Like, what is the most important question a human being can ask? And she says, it works like this. As a monk, I wake up very early in the morning. So it's 4:30 in the morning and my room is all dark and my eyes open. And I lie in my bed and I say to myself, what's going to happen to me today? Most important question that you, Jill, can ever ask in your entire life. Same thing, Abba. This most important question you can ever ask. What's going to happen to me today? So when I went to see Pat and Marie, I had said to myself, what is going to happen to me today? And I said to myself, I'm going to find out what it's like to be a young girl who's mentally disabled. They can't read. Pat and Marie have a really hard time reading. They're maybe, I don't know, grade 4, grade 5 level of intellectual capacity. I mean, what is it like being in Pat or Marie's shoes and your parents drop you off at the door of an institution and they don't visit because the doctors say, don't visit, just forget that you have kids. Go have some other kids. We'll take care of these kids. And then they go into the institution and they were tortured. As we go through the documentary, you will find out that there were big sinks in those rooms. And remember, these are kids that they had all kinds of behavior problems, language problems. They couldn't, often they couldn't take care of their own, go to the bathroom on their own, all this kind of stuff. They were tortured, some of them. And the stories about the class action lawsuit that now those people decided to go to court against the government of Ontario and say, you knew, because experts were telling you that we were being mistreated and you didn't do anything. We think that you owe us money. And so there was a big court case and they won. But the question I'd asked myself was the question that Penna was asking. What is going to happen to me today? And I said, what is going to happen to me today? How is my life going to change when I hear from these people what went on? And when I follow them, like one of the things that is different from documentaries than news often or other kinds of storytelling, this audio storytelling is, you have a microphone. You can go anywhere. And look, there was at the beginning of in the 1920s, there was a Russian theater guy. He was a theater producer and a director, and his name was Stanislavski. And Stanislavski wrote a book called An Actor Prepares. And the book is about how do you teach actors to get into the scene, right? How do you make them cry? Like, how do they get the emotions right when they step onto the scene? Well, look, that's really good training for you as documentary makers, because you're saying to yourself, I'm going to be interviewing Pat and Marie about what it was like being little girls in that institution. Now, I can sit in the park and talk to her about that, and they will answer me. That's not a problem. They remember. But what if I take them to Aurelia? And Stanislavski, that's what he talks about in the book. If you want an actor to start crying, what do? Do you say cry? No. Do you kick him in the bum till they hurt and they cry? No. You say to them, go back to a time in your life when you were really hurt, be it a breakup, be it something, a parent who died or some situation, and take yourself in your head back to that place. And human beings are built, we are built so that those emotions are just on the surface. They will come back. They will come back. And now I'm thinking about being with Pat and Marie, and I almost feel like crying right now because I'm building again in my head that scene. So I figured if I could take Pat and Marie back to Aurelia, into the room, into the spaces where they were, that story will come alive. So what I'm going to do now is, so I learned from Stanislavski. I learned from Pema Chodron. See, I'm a documentary maker. I'm a sponge. And so are you. You absorb from life, right? You bring it in and you question. And like Leonard Cohen, you say, I'm getting sick and tired of my own opinions.
Okay.
So how can I change as a person so that I can be more open and figure out, as Francine asked at the very beginning, how do you know what a story is? Well, the story is human beings. And the story is human beings doing things to each other, good things and bad things. And that's all documentaries are. Watch them. Go to the documentary channels. Go. It's about people doing things to other people, right? It's not an institution doing it to somebody, because institutions are run by people. You want to, wars aren't started by the Pentagon. Wars are started by the generals in the Pentagon. And you've got to get to wars are started by you got to get to the players. You got to get to them. You got to get to them. Shoe leather. They talk about shoe leather journalism, because in the old days, shoes had leather on the bottoms. and that's what it was, is you getting out in the field, okay?
David, because questions are adding up. So
okay, let me look.
Go back to let's play that. It's a great part of the document.
Okay, let me go there. Okay, just a second here. Go up here. Okay, just a second. Share screen. Okay, I'm gonna go. Okay, go. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. I'll just go a little later in here. They were both 21. An unlocked door. For the first time.
You're not sharing the screen.
Okay. And be able to come to the canteen.
Sweet has a privilege. Don't worry, it's okay.
We wander endless hallways, room after room of peeling beige paint and scruffy tiles. Patricia tries the elevator.
Wait a minute, let's see.
The door slides open to a hallway of classrooms.
Yeah.
This is where Patricia and Marie went to school.
That's right, it was. I'm pretty sure of it.
Put your tongue between your teeth, please. Birthday.
The government's information film, one on every street, was filmed in rooms like these. The camera carefully shows little girls in white blouses and navy blue jumpers learning how to behave, how to be polite.
There was nowhere to turn. Nobody listened. And we got warned that if we tried to report it to the outside, we would get punished when we got back. And they would get the other kids to abuse us. I'm sorry. I hated that place.
I, David McKillop of the city of Gutnik in the Republic of Ontario, make oath and say who I am. I am a
plaintiff
in this action.
Since Patricia and Marie started their class action suit, former residents of two other institutions, the Rideau Regional Center in Smiths Falls and the Southwestern Regional Center in Blenheim, have initiated lawsuits of their own.
I worked part-time at the car dealership in Gutnik.
But David, I'm going over it here, and it says...
Clean toilet with a toothbrush, wear
embarrassing
nightgown all day, kneel and hold a pail of water in each hand for extended periods of time. They thought I was bad.
Were you bad?
No.
You say here, I couldn't tell anyone about the abuse because I was afraid that the Rideau staff and other residents would abuse me even more.
Yeah, right.
Because here you say you got kicked in the groin.
Yep.
What they're going through right now, it's hard on us and it's hard on him.
Eileen McKillop holds her husband's hand. Two battle-weary, middle-aged people on a well-worn couch. Like Patricia and Marie, David and Eileen get help from friends, neighbors, and various community organizations when they need it. They manage well, proud of their independence. There's a macaroni casserole bubbling in the oven, and a guitar on David's lap.
No picture at all when I was young.
No pictures of you when you were in the institution?
No.
You usually have pictures of yourself when you're a kid, but him having these pictures, that is weird.
Don't want to bring back the memory too much I can't.
But now you're involved in this class action lawsuit against the government of Ontario.
Don't stand up for all the people who will not stand up for themselves.
And you're having to remember what it was like being in there.
Beaten up by a staff and sexual assault. That happened to me too. I'm an 8-year-old.
David's stories echo those of Patricia and Marie. The body of evidence is growing.
Some people say I'm a groupie. Some people say I am dumb. But if you spend some time with me, you'll find I'm feeling free, Lord. Think about people who died in the institution, people who left the place. That's what that song all about. Lord, give me
Après, ça marche.
Hi. So, you know, that was really hard work, that documentary, because I had to go into myself and bare my soul to them and listen. There's lots of editing, man. I taped and taped and taped, but I hadn't planned to get David to sing a song. You know, I was in his house because he was part of the class action lawsuit. And I was gathering material, right? So I had them feeding their little parrot. I had them eating the macaroni casserole. I found out that David worked at the car dealership across the street. He lives in Gutnik on your way to Kingston. He washes the cars in the car lot. But so I'm sitting in his living room, and there's a guitar. And I said, "Well, what's the guitar for? You play Beatles songs? What do you do?" He says, "Well, a little bit, but I wrote a song." I said, "What did you write the song about, Dave?" He said, "About being in the institution." But you see, it's me sitting in the living room looking around, and I'm going, what's going on? What's going on? How can I? Plus, you're a documentary maker, right? So you're thinking, okay, how can I have different textures in my documentary? Music will help, but I don't just want to play some. If I can have David singing, isn't that amazing? Isn't that? Have you ever heard that before in your life? So my idea is this in my documentaries. I'm going to take you where you usually can't go because as the documentary maker, you're a special person. You have access to places that your listeners don't have. You get to go there. I get to sit with David in his living room and have him sing for me. You heard Patricia and Marie. I mean, what do I have to say? I mean, they were back where they hadn't been for decades. And it just came, like Stanislavski said, man, it came rushing forth. I mean, there's also a funny scene because they had good times in there too. And I take them to where the store was and they go, "Oh, isn't this where we used to buy cheesies?" And then Marie goes, "Oh yeah, and ice cream cones, weren't those the best ice cream?" So, you know, when you're making your documentaries and you're going tension, release, like I'm not there to bang your head with a hammer saying, "Do this, think this." It's like, no. I'm like what Pemish, I wonder what is going to happen to me today. And that's, the listener doesn't expect that either, right? The listener's part of that too. The listener says, I wonder what I'm going to hear today. They're sitting at their kitchen table. They've got their coffee. They've just made toast. And all of a sudden this comes on the radio. And my goal is to say, I'm creating a sacred space here, right? I created a space between Pat and Marie where they trusted me. I created a space with David and me where he was willing to play his song for me. I was willing to walk down the streets of Outreau and have a Hasidic guy talk to my microphone. I'm creating those sacred spaces where it's just you and me, and I'm listening. And like what Nanor asked, that whole idea about what have I learned? Well, I've learned to create that space where it's just us. And we're going to find a place that's so beautiful and so trusting. The I and the thou, the two of us are going to meld something, and something special is going to happen in that space. Well, I'm trying to create that with the listener too. I want that listener to sit in their car in the driveway. You make a podcast, you want the no, Mom, I'll do the dishes later. This podcast is on. I just want to hear what's going on. That's what you want to do. Okay.
David, I'm interrupting because we have a few good questions.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's see.
Can we ask?
Yes. Oh, so here's some from Jill Fraley to everyone. I'm an accidental trespass. Hello, Jill.
No. Okay, no, I'm going to ask them.
Okay.
Abbas is asking, do you have an example that you thought you had a good story, but then later you figured out there is no story. It fell through.
Yes. 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 That is the most terrible story. It's, what often happens is I was in Victoria and I was covering the Commonwealth Games, which is a sporting activity. And they had built a velodrome. And so I was supposed to be finding all kinds of stories behind the scenes about, sort of sports stories and things like that. And the host came and said, I was just on the bike racing track, and it's made of wood, and there's cracks in that track. And if those guys are racing and women are racing around the track at 40 kilometers an hour and their front wheel gets caught, they're going to be dead. And I thought, oh my God, what a great story that is, that all this money spent on this equipment and it's good. So I ran out to the track and I talked to one of the athletes and he goes, hey man, they all look like that. And I realized that I didn't have anything there. It wasn't, so I had built up things in my head and they just dissolved. And so one of the things that you have to do too is documentaries are dependent on people talking to you. And it's really important that you create that link. So you might have a really good story, but if you can't find the right voices, it'll disappear. So it's really good to spend lots of time talking to people, figuring out who they are, and making sure that you can get people who will talk to you. So the stories that haven't worked for me are the ones where I've either built up the story in my head and it was wrong, or I just couldn't get people to talk to me. And I couldn't create that space. And so they sounded like talking heads. And whenever you're in a situation where the person talking at you sounds like they're reading from a manuscript or they're reading from a question line, or they're trying to tell their story over top of what you understand, it's going to die. And it's happened to me a lot. It happens a lot.
There's no story without with characters.
We're people, I'm looking at all these beautiful faces out there. You are people. That's what we do. Okay. That's how we tell stories. We get the characters involved and we tell the stories through people. We tell them through people. Remember, audio is different than visual. Visual is different than print. So people say, oh, You're a journalist. Well, for me, what does that say? Zero. It doesn't tell me anything because it's too vague. So what do? Well, I tell radio stories. Oh, what does that mean? Well, I tell stories about people. Oh, well, yeah. Once I was covering an election here in Montreal, and a big fancy reporter from Toronto came in, and he said, "So what do you do?" And I told him, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, I don't tell human interest stories." And then I gave him the answer that I'm the proudest of in my entire life. I said, so he says, "I don't do human interest stories." And I say to him, "So who do your stories interest?" He looked like he wanted to punch me.
Yeah. Okay. There's another question. Oh, that brings us back to, sort of the junction between radio documentary. It's Pamela is asking, can you talk about how a documentary fits into a weekly podcast? Well, I mean, it depends on the podcast, of course.
You know what? You know who's a master of this? I don't know if you guys listen to Heavyweight. Do you guys know the podcast Heavyweight? It's by a Montrealer, former Montrealer. His name is Jonathan Goldstein. And Jonathan used to make a podcast out of the CBC. It was a podcast radio show, started off as a radio show because there weren't podcasts, called Wiretap. And then when podcasts started, he moved to the States and he started his own podcast out of New York, out of Brooklyn, called Heavyweight. And it's about people and change and how they change. And he is excellent at combining an interview that suddenly becomes a documentary. And it's almost, I listened to one yesterday. It was beautiful. It was about music and our relationship to music during Thanksgiving. So, he's got his researchers, and they're on the podcast, and they're talking about their experiences with music and, not being able to get home at Thanksgiving because of COVID. And so all of a sudden there's this shift. And the researcher who's been talking to Jonathan about COVID and not being able to go home at Thanksgiving, the tape starts sneaking in. And it is the researcher on the phone with their mom. And one of the things they used to do together as a family at Thanksgiving is make a crab chip dip together. And that would be what they would, well, here they are. All of a sudden, they're on Zoom making the crab chip dip. And the mom has sent the ingredients to the daughter, and they're busy making it together on Zoom. And it becomes a documentary in the middle of a conversation. And you realize that we're being transported somewhere by voice. You can't see the crab dip. You can't see that they've gone from being Zoom to Zoom in a interview situation into a Zoom situation where they're actually doing something together. And it's very gentle. So I would say documentaries take you places. That's the difference. In documentaries, you can have interviews, but also what's happening is you're going places, right? You're creating spaces, invisible spaces in people's heads, and you're taking them there. That's what you want to do. Look, you all do this already, right? You go, "Oh my God, you wouldn't believe my father's new wife. There we were. We were in the kitchen, right? That bitch. Do you know what she did? She had gone into my bedroom and she opened the drawer and she pulled out my journal and she was flipping through it. Can you believe that?" You've created a space, right? You've created a story, and you instinctively have built a box, and you're taking me as your listener into that box, and I can see the walls. I can see her pulling open the drawer. I can hear her flipping through the pages of your journal, reading those pages out loud to your dad. I can hear your anger. I can hear your frustration. Look, I've just created that for you, right? I didn't plan to. So you see, there's the answer to your question is yes, podcasts can go into, look, over the decades that I was at the CBC, I came up with 3 rules. And I don't know if you guys are ready, but I'm going to give you something that's going to save you years of work. I'm going to give you something magical. And you know what? It's free. Ready for Gutnick's 3 rules of documentary making?
Yes.
Rule number 1, get your facts right. Because you want to create trust. You can't be wrong. People's names have to be pronounced right. If there was an old journalist at the CBC, Norman DePoe, and he said, 3/4 of journalism, I think he said 95% of journalism is making sure you get the middle initial of the guy who fell down the well right. That is, you know what? When you're doing your documentary about Pat and Marie going back to Aurelia, you will have read the research. You will know the research. When you're putting together your documentary, you will make sure that they went to Aurelia and not to Smith Falls. You will do that stuff, right? Because if you're doing like my documentary was presented in front of a judge in a court case, okay? The government of Ontario did not want those people to win. The government did not want to spend $80 million and hand it over to all these intellectually disabled people. My documentary was presented as a fact in a court case. Man, I had to make sure the facts were right? If I'm doing a documentary, I want to make sure that things are, number 1, get your facts right. Number 2, if you're doing a podcast and it has to be out Thursday noon, because that's what you've told your listeners, then it's got to be out Thursday noon. If you're doing a documentary and your producer or your says to you, look, this week on the show, we've got 17 minutes. We're going to have a vet. We're going to go over your documentary at noon today to take a look at the script. Well, at noon, don't show up and say, yeah, I didn't quite finish the writing. And, I've got 5 other interviews to do. And no. So number 2, your producer is God. Number 1, get your facts right. Number 2, producer is God. I can't go into my meeting and my producer says, okay, Gutnik, you're on tomorrow. There's a 17-minute slot in the show. And I go, 17 minutes? I can't tell a story in 17 minutes. I've got 47 minutes. Every clip has to be on the radio. No, doesn't work. Producer's God. Number 3, ready? Don't be boring. There's no rules. Man, if you can do a documentary with a talking horse explaining what it's like to be in the rodeo, do it. If you can figure out a way of making it factual rewrite and it fits on the show and it isn't boring and it works, do it. There's all kinds of ways of doing documentaries. There's documentaries with narration. There's documentaries, there's no narration. There's documentaries where I've had people sit down with me and we almost write out the documentary before we go into the field because we don't have time. We go, okay, you're going to be talking to politician A. He is against Bill 101. So we need a clip of him saying, no, English is not, English is more important than French. That's what we need is get that. And you can do documentaries like that where you go out and you basically put it together like Lego. That's another way of doing it, right? You feel it, you watch the shot and you go, okay, what's missing here? Okay, we need a nun. Okay, well, you've got 2 hours, go out and find a nun who will tell you what she thinks about the Pope, right? That's another way of making documentaries. There's another way of making documentaries. You go into the field and you just grab tape and grab tape and grab tape, and the story starts to tell itself. And that was a little bit about my story in Outremont. Now, I had no characters. I just was walking around. It was COVID times. I was just with my microphone on a stick. And the documentary, I didn't know that Martha was going to put those young Hasidic guys on the roof until basically that morning. And then I had to figure out how to get there. So that's another way of making documentaries. But don't be boring because no one will watch it. No one will listen to it. No one will read it. And on the radio or in a podcast, so 3 rules, right? Get your facts right. Number 2, your producers are God because these are the people that are helping you put this together. And look, you don't need a professional producer. Ask your roommate, ask your mom, ask your boyfriend, ask your girlfriend. Listen to this. What do you think about it? And if their eyes start to wander, or they go, "Oh, that's really good." I always know if someone's interested in my documentary, because when I say, "What do you think?" they go, "Oh, I really like that cowboy. He was the coolest guy." Imagine those poems were. That's someone who is listening. If someone goes, "Oh, it was really good," I go, "Yeah, what does that mean?" "Oh, I don't know. I didn't listen." So,
okay, David, I'm jumping in because time is getting short, and I don't know if you have there's more things that you want to talk about. I just to finish on that question, Pamela. Really, podcasts can be anything. It could be, Gutnik stories. It could be every week you tell a people story, a la David Gutnik, for example. Or you could take his Gristle and Stew story and make it a series and do an installment. Podcasts can be just about anything. It's great in the sense that you decide what it's, but what you can't be without is what David is talking about. It's got to have structure. It's got to have great characters. It's got to have good times and bad times. So podcasts can be absolutely anything. It's a vehicle in which you put stuff in. You just have to make sure you put the good stuff in. Okay, so what would you like to finish with, David?
Here's what I'm going to finish. Okay, so imagine this. My producer says, "Gutnik, you're going to Saskatchewan. You got to find some documentaries." Oh yeah. So I'm looking around, Googling Saskatchewan, Googling, prizes, Googling whatever. And I find that there's a 99-year-old woman in Saskatchewan who's been given Artist of the Year award. I go, "Oh, can I phone her?" No, she's in an old folks home. I talked to her son. He says, "Oh yeah, Mom's a pretty good talker." I look up, I like her photos. I find out that she's done a series of photos. She started photographing when she was in her 60s. And she did some photographs of farm wives. So I know I'm going out to meet an elderly woman in a senior's home who became a photographer in her 60s. So I go, how can I turn that into a story? So I go to meet her. Her name is Thelma. There she is. There she is, Captain. And I just want you to hear a couple of her. There's a photo she took. Oops. Let's see if I can move this down. I'm having trouble moving this in the right place. Okay, here's another photo. Here's some of her photos. There's one, there's another one. These are farm wives, okay? Another one, another one, another one, another one. Documentary. So here, as I meet Thelma, I'm realizing, oh my God, Thelma is me. So that is going through my head, okay? I'm saying to myself, hey, I'm a documentary radio and podcast maker. Thelma documented with her camera. What can I learn from Thelma about what it's like being a documentary maker? And that's what it becomes. So I'm going to play you a few minutes of the beginning and a few minutes of the end of this, okay? So here's the intro, I think, by Michael, and you're going to hear the beginning of the documentary.
I think if you find something you love, it's just so exciting. You can develop it later in life. Your brain is a ball of energy. If you activate that creativity, it gives you energy. Now that's just some stupid idea that I have.
I'd love to hear you sing this just once more. It's called the Homestead Song, 1911.
We came from North Dakota from the land so bright and clear to our Canadian homesteads, which we did love so dear.
Even those pioneer women that brought up, 15 or more children and came from such poverty, and you know the story.
But there were so many ditches, we often had some bumps, but we were happy. We'd sing and play.
To me, at the end of the day, they did something creative with making baskets out of willow twigs or making pillowcases out of flour bags, or even some of them did art with egg whites and colored the egg whites with berries. It's such a little thing, isn't it? But it's part of you. No one can duplicate it. And to me, that's powerful. And so with me, I found I'd be working in the darkroom till 2 a.m. and my husband would yell at me, "When are you coming to bed?" And oh, I got to make a better print. I had spent my whole life not really doing anything for myself. My life was over, wasn't it, at that stage when my children left home. I tried reading a geography book to the blind. I tried going to the university hospital, and I spent a lot of time choosing children's books to read to them. I so believed in reading to children. They didn't want me. And so where do I go? And thank goodness my husband came through and said, maybe the old people will need you. And wow, there was this Luther home just 2 blocks from where I lived. So I just went out there, and within 2 or 3 weeks, I knew this is where I belonged. And I brought that camera for $2,000, and probably worth nothing today. I was happy, and I'd had this great background in darkroom printing. I was a good printer. And then it was kind of sad that when my husband retired, and he wanted to be part of me. I think he wanted to go on trips with me. He wanted to go in the dark room and print, and he couldn't print. He was searching for something, and I found something. I don't know what I would have done without this. 35 millimeter. Now, you open that. There we are. And there goes the film in there. HP 5, 200 You wind it until you get number 1 there. And then I get it in focus. That's great. Life really begins for a lot of people at 60 because your children have left home and you're ready to go, and maybe cells in your rest of your body decay, but not your brains. That's one out in the hall. And
so do you like Thelma?
Yes, you just want to be careful. I think we need to take the last questions and just wrap it up, so we won't be able to go to the back. So
okay, I just want to say one little thing. You see, as the documentary maker, I created this safe space with Thelma. And I didn't realize this, but I was almost working like a therapist. I didn't know that Thelma had a history of depression. And I kept pushing her. Thelma, why did you want to take photos of these women? She said, I made them happy. So Thelma, why was that important to make someone else happy? She goes, I don't know. And I said, well, Thelma, was it something in you? Was there something missing in you that you wanted? Because remember, she's a documentary photographer. I want to know what made her, because I want to know if that can become me. And the more we talked, the better it gets and the better it gets. So I'm going to end with that, is that.
Yeah, that's good. And it's good because the last question, there's a question from Karia, which sort of comes to the heart of what you've been saying about the sacred place. He's asking how you get a person's trust. I imagine with Thelma, it was easy, because if you think of Thelma as yourself, you already identified with her. But he's asking, have you ever been in a situation where you didn't have the trust of the interviewee at first, or you just couldn't really get it up there?
You know what? And it does happen. And it's so disappointing, because you work so hard I'm working so hard to try and get your trust. And I don't know if I have it, because on Zoom, it's very difficult to know that. In person, it's body language, okay? So when I go into a situation, it's very funny. I get low. With Thelma, I was on my knees, because I didn't want to go in there with a microphone like this and be, hello, Thelma, can you please tell me what is, it's like, hi, Thelma, what was it like? And, creating that sacred space. Yeah, there's a philosopher, his name is Martin Buber, if you want to look him up, Buber, and he wrote a book called I and Thou. Just go to Wikipedia. It's basically, as human beings, we desire to create relationships. As a documentary maker, you want to create those relationships. And so it's not just in the words, it's in facial expressions. It's in how you dress. It's in how you use your body language. And it's also in how much you listen. I'll go right back to the very beginning of that, because Karia, it's really about, people are from very different cultures, right? And when I remember I was sent out to a mosque that was it's on the corner of Jean Talon and I guess Park Avenue, right by the Loblaws there. I think there's like, what is it? A fast food place on the corner. I don't know if I think it might be McDonald's or Harvey's or something. And there's a mosque. Well, there was one of the imams in there was being accused of basically being a terrorist. Basically, that was, imam in Montreal Mosque accused of, helping to send members to Al-Qaeda. I mean, it was just, the sort of blown out of proportion. So I was sent to try and do a documentary about that. Well, you can imagine when I walk in there, this white guy with a tape recorder, shoes off, and like, this is not going to happen, right? The imam there did not want to talk to me. So no, we don't talk, blah, 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 blah. So one of the guys I said, man, this is really hard. I mean, you understand, I know, can we just go outside and like have a chat over a coffee with no tape recorder and stuff? And you know what? By the end of having the coffee and the tape recorder off and everything, he said, why don't you come to my house and meet my wife? Meet my kids. You'll see that we're really good people. And so I managed, by being very open to the other, to be able to do a story where the story changed dramatically. It was not imam, it was how terrible the consequences of headlines are on regular people. It was the story turned upside down, because I wanted to do a human story. And the human story really was, maybe there's one or two bad eggs in that mosque or something like that, but the real thing is 99.9% are just ordinary guys and women who go to this mosque. And that's the story that doesn't get told, because it isn't sexy. It doesn't make headlines. What if the headline was, members of Montreal Mosque are really nice people? That's not going to sell newspapers.
But yeah, if I can just butt in, if you can show people that you're interested in them, not in what they represent as news a news potential, but you're really interested in them or their story, and you turn off your microphone to start, I think that's a very good tactic. You
Yes.
get much farther. You get
Don't,
much.
don't just jump in with your equipment and I'm going to do this. You can't just walk into a homeless shelter. I mean, I know a photographer 2 weeks ago. She walked into the shelter that is on the corner now of St. Catherine and Atwater. Okay, it's where you can go during the day. It's a day shelter, and you can go and you get food, and so a lot of homeless people. She walked in there with her camera and just started shooting. Well, how long do you think that lasted? About 10 minutes. But I've been in there with my tape recorder, and you go to the person who runs it and you say, look, I'm David, and you create, and here's what I'm doing, and and then you meet a guy and hi, well, haven't I seen you? Don't you hang around on the corner of Saint Denis? And oh yeah, you're the guy with the orange dog, aren't you? Yeah. Oh yeah. You create a relationship, and then an hour in, you're sitting there, and there's 4 homeless people hanging around beside you, and you got your microphone out, and you're having a conversation. You don't do that by running in, holding your microphone, going, hello, I'm just taping now. Does anybody mind? Doesn't work like that. You create relationships. And the same, I mean, I wish every single one of you was sitting across the table from me now, because I would create a relationship with you. I would do my best to somehow bridge that gap. And like, everybody has stories in them. What stories are going to be told, and what stories you manage to tell, and how you tell them is a whole other world. But everybody has stories in them, and it's just you getting to those stories.
So it's after 2, I'm afraid. Is there one last question? One question that must absolutely be asked today to David Gutnick and his legendary documentary radio making.
And Francine has my email, and if you want to privately just write Francine and say, like, I'd like to talk to David privately, I'm available. So if you want to throw things at me, like, write me, and then we can talk on the telephone. And I'm completely like, because you know what? It's about storytelling, and you're storytellers, and storytellers share things.
Okay, you're on where you're going.
Really, seriously.
Email up in lights, and you'll be inundated. Well, thank you so much, David. That was wonderful. That was a wonderful way to close this series for this semester. I hope you'll be back.